Hi there, it's Mrs. Gearing here with more Latin grammar for you today. So today we are looking at the relative pronoun, which in its nominative singular form in Latin is quae, quod. Now, if you've never come across this before and you've got no idea what this means, no stress, that's exactly why this video is here. So this in Latin translates to who. So for masculine and feminine, we'd say who normally, and which. This doesn't always directly translate. So if you have in Latin a word that is masculine, like a book, but that in English is not naturally a person, then you would translate it as which. So let's have a look at this. So what is a relative pronoun? Well, the pronoun itself is the word that connects two sentences. It always refers back to another noun. We're going to look at some examples in a second, which will make this clearer. As I said, it translates as who or which. So here we have a good example in English. The girl who is singing is my sister. And you can see here we have our main sentence, the girl is my sister. That makes sense on its own. And who is singing is a subclause. What that means is it's a clause that cannot stand on its own. It is subordinate to the main clause. So, as I say, don't get bogged down here by all our fancy grammar terms. They really aren't essential to learn when you're starting Latin. It's just if you want to know them, I have put some of them in. So technically, your relative pronoun introduces a relative clause. A clause, just think of it as being parts of a sentence. It's a fancy way of saying parts of a sentence. Would be my best simple description of a clause. I'm sure there's better ones out there, but that's what I would usually say. So your relative clause is a type of subclause. It cannot stand on its own. It depends on your main sentence. And so they are dependent, as I say, and they relate more information. I would always say this just so you remember that they are relative clauses. They relate more information about the noun. So look here. So if you have read the Aeneid in any language, then this might make sense to you. Aeneas, who is brave, defeats Turnus. So your who is brave is your relative clause. Your who there would be your relative pronoun. That is a spoiler for the Aeneid and Aeneid Book 12. If you haven't read it, I apologise. Your Latin relative pronoun. In the nominative singular, it looks like quae, quod, as I already said. We translate it as who or which, and it must agree with its noun, which is whatever it's referring back to. The fancy way of saying this is your antecedent. It must agree with the noun it refers back to in gender and number. Not necessarily case. Sometimes it does agree with it in case, but it doesn't have to. So if we look here, I see the man who is running. I see the man who is running. And so your relative pronoun there, I hope we can pick out as quae, as who. And so here, who's this referring back to? It's referring back to the man. Now, if we look at gender, number, and case, virum is masculine, singular, accusative. I see the man. That's our main clause there, our main sentence. I see the man. Now, who is running tells us more about the man, right? And here in our subclause, in our relative clause, he is now the subject. So the who would be masculine singular, yes, but it would be nominative. So it agrees back in gender and number with the noun it refers back to, but it might take its own, well, it always takes its own case. It might not be the same case as we had it in its main clause. Here you have your whole table of your relative pronoun. So as I say, quae, quod is what we would always refer to this table as, and then the rest of it you just have to learn. This comes out of my Essential Grammar Tables booklet, which you are able to purchase by contacting me if you want. Quae, quod. Quem, quod, cuius, qui, quo, qui, quas, quorum, quibus. You don't have to learn it going crossways, I just think that's easiest. If you've learned ilud, or hic, hoc, you will see some similarities here with your genitive and dative singular. The easiest thing to do is just to learn this and be able to chant it through and sound slightly crazy while you do it. But then you will know, so long as you know your order of your cases, nominative, vocative, accusative, genitive, dative, ablative. You don't need a vocative for your relative pronoun. If you need an explanation of your cases, check out the video that I will put up now. But this is your essential table that you want to learn. Your Latin relative. This is a free image from Wikipedia, but it's showing Dido and Aeneas, a painting from the 1600s. So your relative pronoun introduces your relative clause, which we have said many times now. So if we look here, Dido, who is sad, kills herself. A trigger warning and a note that I've just ruined Aeneid Book 4 for you as well. I'm not doing very well here on spoilers. Aeneas, who hears these things, flees with his men. Technically untrue, he was fleeing already. But there you get an example of, well, two examples of your relative clauses. So, as I said, they must agree back in gender and number, and they take the case of whatever they're doing in the new sentence. So, here we have Dido, who is sad. So here, Dido, feminine, singular, nominative. Now, in the relative clause, who is sad, she actually is still our subject, so quae is exactly the same. And similarly, Aeneas, qui haec audit, who hears these things. He is masculine and singular, and he is nominative in both clauses here. But he doesn't necessarily have to be. We could have had Aeneas, whom Dido saw, in which case he would then be accusative in his relative clause. So this gives you an example of different sentences, including your relative pronoun, and these are your relative clauses, the ones in the square brackets. So let's practice it. If we look at this sentence, the girl, puella, hears a story, audit fabulam, which, quae, pleases her. Placeo weirdly takes the dative, oh, I'm writing dative, pleases her. So you can see here, we have our relative pronoun. So if you want to pause, do this on your own and then press play again. That is a good idea, but otherwise I will go through it now. So quae is our relative pronoun, which. And this is a prime example of what I said to begin with. Quae here is actually feminine, but in English we wouldn't refer to a story as a she or as a who, so you would put which. What are the boundaries of our relative clause? Well, that is the quae ei placet, which pleases her. That is the extra information we get here about the noun, the story, which means fabulam is the noun it refers back to, the story. That is your antecedent. Now, gender number in case of the relative pronoun and your antecedent. So our antecedent is feminine, singular, accusative. But in the relative clause, it's become nominative. The story pleases her. So feminine singular still, we've said they have to agree in gender and number, but it takes its own case. It is nominative. Right. As I've said, if we take nothing else away from this video, hopefully you will remember other things, but it must agree, your relative pronoun must agree with the noun it refers back to in gender and number, but not necessarily case. So here we have another example. The boy, masculine, singular. Whom you see. He in the first bit is nominative. Here he's masculine, singular, as we'd expect, but he is accusative. Whom you see, because you see the boy. He's accusative in that subclause. And the boy, whom you see, loves the girl. This is just a useful crib sheet about all the different ways that you could translate your relative pronoun. So if it's in the nominative, it's going to be either who or which. So it could be the girl who sings is happy. Nominative, quae. So who or which. I forgot to put in the neuter options here with this sheet, but I'll add them in as we go. Your accusative will, in true English grammar, you would translate as whom. In modern English, you would get away with translating it as who, but it's easiest to think of it as whom. If you see whom in the English when you're translating into Latin, you will know immediately it needs to be accusative. And it can also be which, as shown in the sentence. The man sees the book which quem the boy carries. So in the Latin, the quem is masculine because it's agreeing back to librum. But in English, we wouldn't refer to a book as a who, so it would be which. The genitive we will always translate as whose or of which. So the girl sees the boy, puerum, whose book she has. So she has the book of the boy in the street. She sees him in the street. Your dative will be to or for whom or to or for which. And so we have the example here. The teacher to whom I gave the book praises me, quae to whom. And your ablative by, with, or from whom, or by, with, or from which. So the boy talks and narrate about his friend de amico, with whom. So here you have the cum, because with your people, you've got your ablative accompaniment, so cum, with whom he often plays. So this gives you an idea of how you would translate each different case of your relative pronoun. As a just useful tip, and the picture will become relevant in a minute when I give you an example sentence. If you get stuck on the case of your relative pronoun, try making it into a main sentence. So make your subclause, your relative clause, your quae, quod clause into a main sentence. So if you look at this sentence, the slave is happy, the slave whose dog I love. I love the dog, and genitive whose. So if you turned around the cuius canem amo, the whose dog I love, what you are saying is I love his dog. I love the dog of him. So you know it is genitive. That is the easiest way to get used to what case you want your relative pronoun to be. Do you want any more practice on this? If you do, there will be worksheets and cheat sheets coming out soon, or you can email me the email address in the description for more information on tutoring or worksheets and crib sheets that might help you. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like this video for more grammar in the future.